Welcome to the man himself, Jim Rogers.
Thank you all for coming. Gosh, it looks like I have to thank a lot of people. Thank you, Sue-Ann. Thank you, Raffles. Thank you, Lindemann. No evening is good without wine, needless to say. And it is astonishing that one of the first people that I ever met in Singapore was Frank. He's exactly right about that. It was 4 years ago, Frank. We had just moved to Singapore, and we stayed. My wife, Paige, and I, and my two little girls, were very, very keen on Singapore. We looked all over the world for places to live, as some of you probably know. Wow. We looked all over the world, as some of you probably know, for a place to live. In the end, we decided on Singapore for many reasons. We literally looked, as you can see, Paige and I went for 3 years driving around the world, went to 116 countries, 245,000 kilometers, and as you can see, we got into the Guinness Book of World Records. I'm the first hedge fund manager to drive around the world. And while we were looking, we came to Singapore. Paige had never been to Singapore before, and here we are. It has everything we wanted, and so far we're extremely, extremely pleased to be in Singapore. So when the PA and the PMET contacted me, what did you say, Frank? It was a no-brainer, but it was certainly fairly easy for me to decide to do it, because I have gotten a lot out of Singapore, and my children have, and my wife has, so I'm very pleased to be here. Paige and I started on our trip looking for a place to live. We started in Iceland, we drove through Europe, Turkey, China. Oops. Got lost along the way. China, Korea, Japan, back across Siberia, into Mongolia, across Russia, all around Europe. 32 countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, Asia's first trip to Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, down to the bottom of South America, Central America, up to Alaska, back down to the southern part of the U.S., and back to New York. That was 3 years on the road, with 245,000 kilometers, 116 countries, so you can imagine we were a bit tired when we got home. We decided we would stop and rest for a while. One result of resting for a while is we now have a baby girl. I want you all to know I had never had a child before. I used to think children were a horrible waste of time, energy, money. I was never, ever going to do anything so foolish as to have a child. I used to feel sorry for my friends who had children, but I want you to know I was totally wrong. 100% wrong. This little girl gives me so much pleasure. I cannot get enough of her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is just pure excellence. Everything I tell you all tonight, I'm doing myself. I'm living it, so I'm not giving you advice that I'm not doing myself. So when I tell you, if there's anybody in this room who hasn't done it, I urge you to get home and get on with it. I mean it. You know, take a day off if you have to. Well, don't take a day off these days. Go home for lunch. You know, take a lunch hour or something. These are difficult times, but I'm telling you, you cannot believe how much fun children are. Unless you think I'm just standing up here babbling away, we did it again. We have another one. This is baby B. So Paige and I went home for lunch one day, and the next thing you know, here we are with baby B. They are both great fun. It's a great joy for us, great pleasure for us. So go home, do it for yourself. Do it for Singapore. My goodness, Singapore needs some babies. So get home and get on with it as soon as this drink the wine, and then get home and let's do it. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to show you a 2-minute video of shots from the road. I cannot show you 3 years on the road in 2 minutes, but I want to give you some idea of what it's like to go around the world. Because there was a survey done recently which showed that the number one dream which people have, not everybody's number one dream obviously, But the dream which comes out on top in the surveys is to chuck it all, get in the car, and drive around the world. So I hope that all of you are going to make so much money from these sessions with the PA and other people that you too are going to get yourself a new spouse, or take the old spouse. Nothing wrong with the old spouse. Nothing wrong. Take a spouse and head off around the world. It starts with us in Iceland, toasting each other, wondering if we're going to make it alive. Off to the Great Wall. We did get married on the trip. Here we are cutting our wedding cake. And this is our honey. One of many camels we ran into out there on the road. We went through 15 war zones. These guys were not very friendly at first, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a familiar place. One of many, many markets we visited. This is one of many bad roads. One of the sadder times on the trip, we went to an AIDS orphanage down in South Africa. We went to see King Tut in Cairo. Whenever we could, we stopped at schools. This is in India. I'm very keen on education. We always call it to stir. Everybody wanted their pictures made. Myanmar, which used to be called Burma. And the many roadside stands where we ate and drank. Iguazu Falls in South America. This is the bane of my existence. This is bureaucracy, red tape, regulations. This, on the other hand, is the black market. This is a much higher class of people. And when we got back to the U.S., we kept going. We headed up to Alaska in the dead of winter. And when we got back to New York, our first stop was the World Trade Center. That had blown up while we were gone. Now, let's go around the world again, and we're going to talk about some of the things I've learned in my travels. Some of you know I've been around the world twice, once on a motorcycle and once in a car. I've had some successes in my life. I've had some failures. We'll talk about investing tonight. We'll talk about whatever you want. I'm not going to talk that long because I'm going to throw it over to questions to find out what you all want to know about. But I'll also try to tell you about some of my failures, which we can all learn from, and some of my few successes. The first thing we need to understand, I know we're sitting here in Asia, but it's the rise of China, because what's happening in China is changing the world and is going to continue to change the world in ways that most of us cannot fathom. Most people in the world now know that something's happening in China, but very few really understand the full depth and breadth of what's happening in China, including most Chinese, by the way. Most Chinese are not aware of the historical significance of what's happening. But China's the next great country in the world, whether we like it or not, and a lot of people in the world who don't like that concept. The 19th century was the century of the UK. The 20th century was the century of the US. The 21st century is going to be the century of China. One of the reasons that Paige and I packed up and left New York, I'd lived in New York for many years, was because we do think that China is the wave of the future, and that the 21st century is going to be the century of Asia. We're not here by accident. Nobody sent us here. Nobody transferred us here. Nobody gave us incentives to come here. We're here because of what's happening in China. And we picked Singapore for a variety of reasons. We looked at many cities in China. We love many cities in China. But as you all probably know, most of the cities where we would want to live anyway are so polluted that we had to take them off the list, although we love many Chinese cities. Singapore is not polluted at all, and Singapore to us had the best of both worlds. You know, it's got great health care, great education, everything works, and everybody in Singapore speaks Chinese and everybody speaks English. We didn't know that a lot of people speak bad English and bad Chinese. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people in Singapore speak great English and great Chinese. But my little girls can both speak perfect Singlish now. They're not allowed to speak it at home. And when they both go to Nanyang. One goes to Nanyang kindergarten and one goes to Nanyang primary. It's terrifying to hear them go to school. Chatter away in perfect Singlish. But anyway, we decided that since Asia is the way of the future, to come here. The best advice that I give people when I'm speaking in the West and in Asia, actually, is the best advice of any kind I can give you is to teach your children and grandchildren Mandarin. It's going to be the most important language in their lifetime. Both of my little girls are perfectly fluent in Mandarin. They speak Mandarin like natives, as some of you may know. You may have seen them on TV or some places. You know, it's going to be the most important thing. I think the best skill that I can give two children born in 2003 and 2008 is to speak Mandarin fluently and to know Asian. So we're here. You need to understand this. It's changing the world, but it's going to have staggering changes in the world. There's a huge historic shift going on. Well, let's go back a few decades. In the 1920s and 1930s, there was a major historic shift from the UK to the US. It was exacerbated by a financial crisis and mistakes made by politicians. The same kind of historical shift is taking place now from the US to Asia. Exacerbated by a financial crisis, exacerbated by mistakes made by politicians. Most people don't notice it yet, but some people are aware that something's going on. I would remind you that the largest creditor nations in the world now are China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. This is where the assets are. You know where the debtors are. You know who the debtors are. Never in history, well, scratch that. Throughout history, people have never said, look at all the debtors over there. All those people deep in debt. Let's go there. No, never in history. What they've always said is, look at all that money. Look at all those assets. Look at all those rich people. Let's go there. That's what's happening again. The world is shifting to Asia, and we joined up. Paige and I, Happy and Baby B, because the future is Asia, and we picked Singapore as our place to do it. There are other places clearly here. I would remind you that China is the only country I know in world history that's had recurring periods of greatness. Great Britain was great once. Rome was great once. Egypt was great once. But China's been great 3 or 4 times now. First of all, China's had 3 or 4 periods of staggering success. China's also had 3 or 4 periods of catastrophe, when they have totally collapsed and fallen apart. In fact, for the 300 years before 1978, the 300 or 400 years, China was in serious decline. But in 1978, Deng Xiaoping said, we've got to try something new. This is not working. Communism is not working. He unleashed entrepreneurship and capitalism. You know the rest of the story. But it's not a flash in the pan. It's not a 30-year story. It's going to continue for years to come. So please, you're at the right place at the right time. And for those of you who are still students or have children who are still students, don't ignore the Mandarin. I know that many schools in Singapore emphasize Mandarin, but many students don't like it. Don't listen. You must listen to your teachers and learn Mandarin, because it's going to be very important for all of us in the future. While I'm speaking about the changes that are taking place, I should also tell you that the U.S. dollar is a seriously flawed currency. It's another major historic shift which is taking place. The world's medium of exchange and reserve currency for decades has been the U.S. dollar. That's in the process of changing. The world is slowly moving away from the U.S. dollar. The United States is now the largest debtor nation. Not just the largest debtor nation in the world, the largest debtor